What I want from a woman has everything to do about you, my audience, disclosure, why you are a prisoner on this planet, and why it is so difficult to free you and everyone else on this planet. And this is also connected to the chaos and wars that are raging on this planet and which will likely explode beyond measure. At the end of this talk, I will tie all of this together with a personal recommendation that I give to all of you listening. Together we can make a difference. You can make a difference. Give me a chance to connect the dots and see if you agree or disagree. What I want from a woman is useful as a metaphor that is likely to be misunderstood initially. A flippant answer could be an alpha female with a shared mission who can help turn this planet around. But that misses the entire point of the metaphor. There is a lot to unpack. So let's begin. Starting with relationships in general. Why are so many relationships failing these days? Birth rates are plummeting worldwide. While crisis conditions exist in Japan, South Korea, and Italy, so many other countries, including the United States, are beginning to be affected. For example, in the United States, divorce rates are at 53% of all marriages, and many people are afraid to have a child because of this divorce risk. Babies are so rare in some countries that extraordinary policies are being considered, such as a singles tax on people without kids. Just about everywhere, young people are not getting married and having babies at rates comparable with the past. In fact, many young people are giving up on long-term relationships entirely. There is plenty of evidence indicating that the quality of manufactured food and environmental factors are directly connected to the crashing testosterone levels in men that are on an unending downward spiral. And testosterone directly influences a man's desire to be with a woman. And if testosterone levels keep dropping, it is hard to see how babies are going to happen. And young women have been starting their menses at younger and younger ages, clearly suggesting that the environmental factors affecting male testosterone are probably having a parallel effect on women. Social and political climates have changed as well, where men, by and large, find divorce leaving them financially crippled for decades, giving them little hope of starting all over again. And women too often have to settle for men whom they are not really attracted to, or to look forward to a life lived alone. And the general population, again using the United States as an example, is out of shape, fat, seriously unhealthy, affecting both male and female populations equally. So what is the real problem? Are all these things separate and unrelated items, or are they connected? And what the heck do they have to do with what I want from a woman? And how is all that related to planetary wars, remote viewing, and extraterrestrial disclosure, and the challenges of freeing you from this prison planet? Friends, I would like to propose to you that these things are all connected, and that they are all a consequence of one single thing, and that is living in a prison world where controlling elites want you precisely where they have you, unhealthy, depressed, incapacitated, fighting one another, and enslaved. What you are experiencing, even in your personal relationships, is by design, not by accident. The last thing the elites want, the elites who really control you and the rest of this planet from behind the scenes, is for you to be healthy, alive, emotionally uncompromised, and capable of rebellion. Masters want slaves to know their place, to be docile, and to stay put. So to start to connect the dots, let's go to Han Solo and Princess Leia from Star Wars. Everyone who has seen the Star Wars movies knows that Han Solo is an unconventional smuggler, a scoundrel, a hero, and Princess Leia is a great leader of the Rebel Alliance that fought against the tyranny of a cruel and corrupt galactic empire. Now, Han Solo is super handsome, played by a young Harrison Ford, and Princess Leia is beautiful, played by Carrie Fisher. Now, for sure, these fictional characters had their challenges in life, but they also had something very special. In the Star Wars story, they were not just two young people who fell in love like Romeo and Juliet in the classic Shakespeare play. Han Solo and Princess Leia had something that Romeo and Juliet never had. Han Solo and Princess Leia had a shared mission. They did not simply fall in love because of physical attraction and the charm of personality. They both recognized that they lived lives in a cruel galactic setting, and they both ended up as champions of freedom and galactic liberation. That was their shared mission, to fight for freedom. Freedom for themselves and for everyone else. That was the core element of their bond, and it is hard to imagine Han Solo and Princess Leia falling in love without that crucial element of a shared bond that was bigger than either one of them individually. So let's talk about relationships today. Is there a shared bond of any serious kind in relationships that you see around you? That is, for the vast majority of people, is the relationship the end game? Is the only reason to have a relationship simply to have a relationship, the relationship itself? Is the relationship its own reason to exist? And if it is, what happens when that happens? In the absence of a shared mission, then the relationship is its own reason for existing. There is nothing bigger than the relationship that bonds the people in a shared goal. Now, if you look at soldiers who come back from an intense wartime experience, they form bonds with their fellow soldiers with whom they joined in their struggle for survival, and those bonds are so deep they last a lifetime, even if their time as soldiers lasted only a few years. Experiences with intense emotionality based on a shared mission are extremely powerful bonding forces for people, and without those shared missions with intense emotionality, relationships are weaker by comparison. And this holds true for romantic relationships as much as it does for any other type of relationship. One can argue that having and raising children can be a shared mission, but that is not the same. Children are a consequence of an intense but short-lived sexual experience. A couple can love their kids, but the kids alone are not enough to form a long-lasting emotional bond between two adults, as anyone who has lived through divorce court will attest to. Indeed, it is the reverse. Kids are witness to the bonds that exist between their parents, and if those bonds are weak, no one sees that more clearly than the children. If their parents have a shared mission that deepens their bond, the children can see that clear as day. Children can witness the bond or the lack of a bond between their parents, but there is not much that the children can do about the situation. They can only watch from the sidelines. So if one is seeking a romantic partner, someone with whom one might want to make a lifelong bond, it really helps if there is a shared mission between the two adults. We all know that sexual attraction is a spark that can initiate a romantic fire, but it can never sustain the fire for a long-lasting bond all by itself. Indeed, in many cases, you're lucky if the bond lasts more than one passion-filled night. In general terms, sex is necessary to start a relationship, but it is not enough to keep the relationship going. But there is another side to this coin of sex and relationships. Sex is not enough to keep a relationship going, but in the absence of sex, there is no relationship. That is, for most people who get married, sex is hot and heavy in the beginning, but it is all too quickly stopping. And then people don't really love one another in an intense manner any longer, even if they end up staying together for whatever reason. The relationship was its own reason to exist, and like any fire that burns from a bundle of wood, when the wood is exhausted, the fire goes out. The fire was the only thing keeping itself going, and all such fires self-extinguish. So we want to ask, why does the fire go out? And what can be done to keep the fire burning in a relationship? Now, the answer to that, my friends, is also the answer to how humanity can free itself from this prison planet. So let's connect all this to the prison planet and the challenges involved in freeing you from this prison planet. One of the things about Han Solo and Princess Leia is that they had a shared mission, and their shared mission blended into their love for one another. They cared for each other when each were attacked by the evil galactic empire. They both experienced sacrifice, and they were both willing to sacrifice themselves for the other. They never thought of their relationship in terms of themselves individually, as in the "what do you bring to the table" type of way. Neither one of them thought of the other in terms of whether or not the other person was good enough for themselves. I like to watch videos of self-appointed relationship counselors on YouTube, which often turn into speeches about what is wrong with today's women and today's men. Complainers. What is so interesting to me about these videos is how the relationship counselors all tend to focus on the problems of relationships without ever talking about the existence of or the absence of a shared mission. The relationship is always the end of the story. It is either good or bad, and someone is to blame if it is bad. Each person in the relationship is expecting to extract some value from the other person in the relationship. For example, Dr. Orion Taraban is a psychologist who has developed an economic or transactional theory of relationships, and if one thinks of having a relationship as an end goal, in the sense of having no larger mission, it sort of makes sense. And he is probably correct to say that most people enter into relationships with a transactional intention, an exchange of sex for money. And he is also probably correct to say that it never works for very long, and that most relationships end in acrimony. And who can blame young people today for being so skeptical about relationships in general if it is all about a monetary exchange? I heard one estimate from a divorce lawyer who stated that after you account for all expenses from the divorce settlement, child support, fees, and whatever, it turns out that each sexual experience that the man had with his former wife cost him approximately $50,000. That is $50,000 for each act of sex. So why would young people want to have a long-term legal bond with anyone? It always ends up with a blame game and enormous expenses that ruin any future life. More generally, relationship videos from nearly all of the online relationship counselors tend to focus on the faults of one side or another, and always in terms of the relationship itself. And never do they focus on the absence of a shared mission. It is always a relationship that exists only for the sake of the relationship and the story. So if those relationship counselors are the experts in such relationships, then relationships without a mission don't seem to be a good idea for anyone. Long-term transactional relationships simply do not work. So, in my view, any relationship that does not have a shared mission of some kind, something bigger than the relationship itself, will always end up stressful to both people in the relationship. As soon as the fire of initial sexual experience burns out, then the reality of who each person actually is finally sinks in. And in most cases, most people are, well, to put it bluntly, boring. And who wants to live a long life with a boring person? And it is always the other person who is accused of being boring, never acknowledging that both people are equally boring. What made Han Solo and Princess Leia interesting characters in the Star Wars movies? Well, it certainly was not the romantic relationship by itself. Rather, Han Solo and Princess Leia were interesting people individually. The relationship was interesting because they were interesting as individuals. And when individuals are interesting, then the heat that exists in the beginning of the relationship as a result of sexual attraction has the added fuel of admiration and shared experiences to keep the heat going long into the future. It is hard to get bored with an interesting person. Now, I'm going to do something risky, and that is to point to two real relationships that I personally consider to be successful. I do not know these people, and it could be that what is known about them publicly is not what is real if you know them personally. But at least in terms of what is known about them publicly, some comments can be made that seem useful in the current context. Neither couple seems to have a shared mission of the type that I have outlined here, but they have other aspects that are useful to point out. Now, the first relationship that I would like to point to as an example is David Bowie and Iman. Now, the late David Bowie was both a rock star and movie star, and Iman was and is both a highly successful model and actress. They had a child, and there were children from previous marriages. Both David Bowie and Iman had their own individual careers before getting married, but that was not likely the reason for the success of the relationship. At least from what I can gather from that which is publicly known about the couple, they were both what we might call alpha personalities. They were movers and shakers in their own right. They seemed to have control over their own career domains while not trying to control the career domain of the other person. That is, David Bowie did not try to micromanage Iman's modeling and acting businesses, and Iman did not try to control the rock star or movie businesses of David Bowie. But they did both take an interest in the activities of each other. David Bowie was supportive of Iman, and Iman was supportive of David Bowie. They supported each other without trying to enslave or oppressively control the other. This can clearly be seen in Iman's autobiographical book, I Am Iman. That is an art book, if there ever was an art book. It not only tells the story of Iman's life, but it does so with a level of artistic expression that is astounding by any measure. It is clear in that book how much David Bowie supported Iman without trying to oppressively control her. They did not have a shared mission of the type that I have discussed here. They were not trying to save the planet from a galactic oppressor like Han Solo and Princess Leia did, but they were both extraordinary people who were able to see themselves individually with great clarity. They did not bring something to the table with their marriage. They just were themselves. And both people seemed to be able to recognize the greatness that each one individually held. Now, the next couple who I would like to mention here is Beyoncé and Jay-Z. The aspect of their marriage that I would like to address here is that they both individually are clearly alpha personalities. They are movers and shakers in their own right. And from what is publicly available, neither one appears to try to oppressively control the other. However, at the same time, they do seem to be supportive of each other's interests. A nice example of this is Beyoncé's song and video, Single Ladies. Now, in that extraordinary dance video, there is a moment when Beyoncé uses her hand in a particular manner, angling it one way, then the other. Now, it has been reported that Jay-Z was the one who thought of that idea of using her hand in that way, and Beyoncé liked it and incorporated it into her dance routine. In short, Jay-Z did not try to control Beyoncé, but he was clearly supportive, and he apparently enjoys being supportive. What seems to stand out with both the examples of David Bowie and Iman, as well as Beyoncé and Jay-Z, is that both couples are people who are individually driven. They all have their own missions, and their partners are supportive of each other's missions, even though those missions are not of the same shared mission of saving the galaxy type that Han Solo and Princess Leia had. So let's focus on the idea of a mission, and how is that involved in a successful marriage? As I see it, there are 3 levels of mission building. The first is when there is a shared mission, in the sense of the saving the galaxy thing, where both people are interested in the same overarching thing. Now, this is the type of thing that soldiers in a battlefield experience that makes a deep and lasting bond between 2 or more people. The experience is both emotionally intense and deeply meaningful in a way that is equally shared between everyone involved in the relationship. I call that the mission number 1 experience. Now, the second type of mission experience is where each person in the relationship has a mission, but that mission may not be the same mission that is held by the other person in the relationship. That is a type of relationship that I see with David Bowie and Iman, as well as Beyoncé and Jay-Z. Crucially, while there is no single intense mission that bonds the 2 in the relationship, each person in the relationship is nonetheless supportive of the life mission of the other person in the relationship. And I call that type of mission the mission 2 experience. And then there is the third type of mission, which is where the relationship itself is the mission of the relationship. There is no external deep mission. The relationship is simply what it is, a relationship that exists for its own sake only, and we will call that mission number 3, which is more of a lack of a mission rather than an actual mission. In my experience, relationships of the mission 3 variety have the highest risk of failure. Any relationship in which the relationship itself is the mission shifts the focus away from the individuals in the relationship and instead places the focus on the relationship itself. And that often means that the individuals tend to blame the other person in the relationship for the challenges and failures in the relationship. And ultimately, this results in each person in the relationship finding the other person lacking in some way. And each person in the relationship looks at the other person as the reason why they are so unhappy. Now, in my experience, both people in relationships of the mission 3 variety don't need to look at the other person as the reason for the failure of the relationship. It was probably doomed from the beginning. Rather, first and foremost, they need to look in the mirror and see what they have made of themselves. Start by looking at the physical things. These are often telltale signs of the deeper problems. Are they overweight and out of shape? Is each person attractive, or at least making a strong effort to be and remain attractive? Do they often smoke weed and chill out, rather than take control of their lives with command and authority? Do they have alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, or drug dependencies of any type? Failing to look in the mirror really hard is the key to understanding the failure of most relationships. Moreover, both people in the relationship need to be able and willing to look in their own mirrors. It does no good to look at the failures of your partner if you do not look at your own unaddressed challenges. So now let's connect all this to the prison planet concept. It has long been a result of the research conducted at Farsight that this planet is literally being run as a prison from behind the scenes by a totalitarian group of extraterrestrials who we at Farsight like to call the bad ETs. This planet is a psychological prison, not a prison made of cement and bars like a human prison. As such, keeping the prisoners in a docile state is important to the prison authorities. And the last thing the prison authorities want is a group of prisoners who are alpha personalities, who have a shared mission of breaking down the prison and releasing the prisoners. The prisoners are a resource, a slave resource, that can be used by the totalitarian forces in ways that the prisoners themselves can hardly imagine. And this is why disclosure is so important. Disclosure is not something that can be obtained by having the authorities and their human collaborators do. Congressional hearings will never work to produce real disclosure. And don't count on any president to do anything either. Rather, disclosure must come from within the ranks of the prisoners themselves, and this will always initially arise in the thoughts and actions of alphas in the prison population. Alphas are people who have a strong sense of mission, either a shared mission or at least strong individual missions, the so-called Mission 1 and Mission 2 varieties. So from the perspective of the prison authorities, minimizing the influence of those alphas in the population is the key to keeping the prison population subdued. So, now this gets back to the question that I opened this talk with. What do I want in a woman? Well, there are two things to consider. First, it makes no sense to get involved with any person who does not have at least a personal mission, something that is greater than simply having a transactional relationship, the classic Mission 3 situation. But if the person has at least a personal mission, then that person needs to be an alpha personality who will step up to achieve that mission. Growing fat and ugly, getting out of shape, losing interest in keeping their partner interested in themselves, well, that is obviously not going to be something that will lead to a long-lasting relationship. In short, a person needs to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and care about who and what they see, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally also. That is what alpha personalities do. And remember the telltale signs. If the physical side of the equation is not there, then the rest is also probably not there either. Living a creative life is a work of art. So the successful alpha personality who has a personal mission needs to care about art, their own life as a work of art. But it is also important that the person cares about the mission of their partner. This is what I saw in the relationships between David Bowie and Iman, as well as Beyonce and Jay-Z. They appear supportive of the creativity of each other, and they seem to like and respect the creative abilities of the other. I see no evidence of any of these four people trying to oppressively control the creative elements of the other person in their relationship. I see the problem of the enslavement of this planet as a consequence of a planetary population that has been subdued, pummeled into being beta personalities. And the evidence of this is the fact that relationships between people are lacking missions. People are subdued through the control of information, censorship, and misinformation. People are subdued chemically by introducing both drugs and toxic elements into their food and environment that destroy their abilities to lead. And to reuse an example, I see this demonstrated conclusively by the rapid crashing of testosterone levels among men in today's world. I suspect that there are very few testosterone-castrated males among the surviving alpha male population today. When you crush a man's testosterone, you crush the man. But now, if you have gotten this far with me today, let's shift and talk about the equally important issue of control. Every person wants to have control over their lives. We all want to be able to at least strive to control our own fate. But how does control fit into the idea of a relationship? In my opinion, no one is happy in a relationship unless they can control the other person in the relationship. Now, on the surface, this seems to conflict with everything I just said about the importance of a shared or personal mission that respects the creativity of the other person. But there is no conflict if you consider that there are two types of control, and successful alpha personalities tend to utilize only one of those types. The most disastrous and ineffective means of controlling another person is to do it by force. That is when a person uses things such as threats to get their partner to do things, threats of yelling, extreme disapproval, threats of divorce and abandonment, and in the worst of such cases, physical violence. No person wants to be on the receiving end of such control efforts. But there is another means of control, and people both doing the controlling and being controlled tend to like that means. An alpha personality will make themselves so attractive that the other person in the relationship will be totally drawn to them. Iman, for example, must have known that she had David Bowie wrapped around her little finger, so to speak. Her beauty and her personality worked hand in hand to make David Bowie entranced by her. Moreover, it seems that David Bowie loved this. That is, he seemed to love being entranced by Iman. She controlled him, but not by coercive force, but by being who she is, herself, as an alpha personality who knew how to stay in her frame. She was who she was, and that was powerful enough to capture a rock star. And in his own way, the same must be true of David Bowie and his ability to entrance Iman. The physical elements are often a telltale sign, although this is obviously not a guarantee, since Hollywood is filled with attractive people who get divorced and who end up hating one another. Nonetheless, working on oneself is a telltale sign, in the sense that it is highly unusual to see successful alpha personalities who have their act together who do not also work on how they look. It is not easy to remain attractive. It does not matter who you are. Staying beautiful and interesting as a personality is hard work, and the same appears to be true of Beyonce and Jay-Z. I am absolutely certain that Beyonce is not beautiful just because of her genes. She must work at it a lot. And she must be careful to keep Jay-Z wrapped around her little finger as well, so to speak. Jay-Z is a rich and famous media personality who is always surrounded by beautiful women who would not hesitate to get personally involved with him. For Beyonce to fight off such challengers is not something that can be done by a beta personality who lets herself go to pot. To keep an alpha personality, one needs to be an alpha personality. Again, I have never met David Bowie, Iman, Beyonce, or Jay-Z, but I think these conclusions make sense given what is publicly known about these personalities. So, let's return to the question of what I want in a woman. Well, as with Han Solo and Princess Leia, I do see a situation in which there is the threat of a totalitarian galactic oppressor. This is a real thing, despite the situation of the vast majority of humanity not yet recognizing this. So for me, a relationship of the mission 2 variety, where each person has their own individual mission but there is no shared mission, really does not make sense. Mission 2 relationships can work nicely, but one has to assume that the world is in an equilibrium state for this type of relationship to make sense. But as I see it, humanity and this planet really do need to be saved. It is not a delusion. It is real. So for me, a mission 1 type of relationship, where both people have a shared mission of wanting to take down the planetary prison walls by enabling the truth to be widely shared across the globe, makes sense. Individual missions are nice, and they can work in relationships. But when a high-yield mission is at stake due to interplanetary conflict, individual missions can be distracting rather than unifying. In such cases, a shared mission makes sense while simultaneously recognizing the individual contributions and artistic creativity of each person in the relationship. So let's wrap up this talk with my recommendation to you, the audience. In my view, this planet needs alpha personalities to free itself, not beta personalities. Everyone on this planet needs to look in the mirror really hard and ask yourself, what is your mission? Do you have a mission? Are you a truly interesting person? Do you have any dependencies such as drugs, tobacco, food, alcohol, marijuana, or whatever? Dependencies that keep you focused on those dependencies rather than gaining freedom from a coercive and abusive system that surrounds you. Are you in a work environment where the only thing you think about is your next day off? If you work only for food and shelter, how is that different from slavery? Do you feel like a slave? Do you think about getting into a relationship as a means to get out of slavery? And if you do think that way, why would a free person want to be in a relationship with a slave? These are the types of questions we all need to ask ourselves if we want to be instruments of emancipation rather than captives in a slave system. Look not at the other people with whom you interact to find the answers for these questions. Look only at yourself. If you want to attract an alpha partner rather than settle for a beta whom you are not really attracted to and don't really love, then you must also be an alpha personality. Are you doing anything to become that type of person, a true alpha? It is my belief that anyone can become an alpha personality if they truly want this. But this is my firm belief also. The oppressive system of this world will crumble if enough of the population throws off the chains of oppression, the chains of dependencies, of misinformation, of lies and deceit by the authorities, if enough people truly seek to learn the truth about this world and those who control them. And one of the most surefire ways to accomplish this emancipation is to learn that which the oppressors do not want you to know. I personally know of no more sure way to learn the truth about this world than by watching all or most of the projects that we have done here at Farsight, and which you can find on farsightprime.com. These projects are poison to the control efforts of those who want to enslave you. These projects are food for those who seek freedom and who are willing to make the effort to free themselves. So often I get the question of what someone can do to free themselves. Well, This is my answer. Just as a book is useless unless you read it, a video library of true information is useless unless you watch it. If you want to start down the path of true freedom, then learn the truth. That is the most surefire way that I know to start the process of becoming a true alpha personality. Knowing the truth will always set you free. Friends, what do you think? Share your thoughts about this in our forums on FarsightPrime.com and in the YouTube discussion area. Do you agree or disagree with these ideas? Let us know. And remember, no one at Farsight seeks to control you. We simply seek to spark a revolution based on people knowing the truth. Do you want to be part of that revolution? All revolutions begin with people talking things over. So sharing your thoughts is always helpful.